When I held that faded marriage certificate in my trembling hands, hidden away in the glove compartment of his shiny new car, I felt the world tilt just a little. Like the ground beneath Charleston's old cobblestone streets had given way. The paper was crisp at the edges, but the ink told a story older than the one he'd been spinning to my daughter. And there, tucked beside it, a scribbled note in his own handwriting. The old bats, too old to notice. My heart didn't race. It just sank, heavy as a stone in the Ashley River. It was a warm afternoon in late spring. The kind where the air in Charleston carries the sweet scent of magnolias blooming along the Battery. I'd been helping my daughter, Sarah, prepare for her wedding running errands, tasting cakes at my bakery, making sure everything was just right. She was my only child, 32 now, with that independent spirit she'd gotten from her father, God rest his soul. He'd passed 10 years ago from a sudden heart attack, leaving me to run our little family bakery on King Street all by myself. But Sarah had always been my anchor, and now she was about to marry Thomas, the man who'd swept into our lives like a fresh sea breeze. I remember that day clearly. Sarah had asked me to pick up Thomas's car from the mechanic, something about a tune-up before the big day. The shop was just a short walk from my bakery, where the aroma of fresh sourdough and cinnamon rolls still clung to my apron. As I slid into the driver's seat, adjusting the mirrors that were set too high for my 5'4" frame, my hand brushed against the glove compartment. It popped open accidentally, or maybe fate nudged it, spilling out a few papers, a registration, some receipts, and then that certificate. I wasn't snooping. I swear, on my late husband's grave. But once I saw it, I couldn't unsee the names Thomas Edward Harlan, married to a Rebecca Lynn Harlan, dated 5 years back. And that note, mocking me like I was some doddering fool. I sat there in the parking lot, the engine idling softly, the hum of traffic on Broad Street fading into the background. My fingers traced the embossed seal on the certificate, feeling the raised letters as if they might dissolve under my touch. Was it real? Thomas had told us he was divorced, a clean break from a short marriage in his 20s. But this was recent, and the address listed was in Savannah, not 2 hours away. My mind raced back to the times he'd disappear for business trips down that way. Sarah had brushed it off, he was a consultant, after all, always on the move. But now, doubt crept in like the evening fog off the harbor. I tucked everything back, my hands steady despite the storm inside. I drove home carefully, the historic homes along Rainbow Row blurring past my window. That evening, as I kneaded dough in my kitchen, the rhythmic push and pull usually calming me, I couldn't shake it. The flour dusted my arms like a fine powder, and the yeast's earthy smell filled the air, but my thoughts were elsewhere. Sarah came over for dinner, her laughter echoing through my cozy shotgun house, with its creaky wooden floors and lace curtains. She chattered about the wedding flower hydrangeas and roses from a local farm and Thomas's latest gift, a necklace with a pearl pendant. I smiled, nodded, passed the buttered cornbread, but inside, a seed of suspicion had taken root. Looking back, my life before that moment had been a gentle rhythm, like the tide lapping at Sullivan's Island. I'd built the bakery from a dream my husband and I shared back when we were young and foolish, mixing recipes in our tiny apartment kitchen. After he died, it became my sanctuary. Mornings started at 4, the oven's warmth chasing away the pre-dawn chill, the clatter of mixing bowls a comforting symphony. By 7, the first customers would trickle in locals, grabbing coffee and croissants. Tourists charmed by the exposed brick walls and the chalkboard menu. I'd hand letter each day. Sarah had grown up in that world of flour and sugar. As a girl, she'd perch on a stool, her small hands shaping cookies, her giggles mixing with the ring of the cash register. She went off to college in Columbia, got a job in marketing here in Charleston, and met Thomas at a networking event 2 years ago. He was charming, 40-ish, with an easy smile and stories of traveling the world. He treated her like a queen. Or so it seemed. Dinners at Husk, walks along the waterfront. Promises of a house in Mount Pleasant with a yard for the kids they planned. Our family was small. Just the two of us since my husband's passing. Holidays were quiet affairs. Thanksgiving turkey with pecan pie from the bakery. Christmas lights strung along the porch. Thomas fit in seamlessly. Or so I thought. He'd help with the dishes, his sleeves rolled up, chatting about his childhood in Georgia. Sarah adored him, her eyes lighting up when he entered the room. And me. I was happy for her, relieved she'd found someone solid after a string of bad dates. I'd even started picturing grandchildren, little ones with her curly hair. Learning to bake in my shop. But that certificate changed everything. That night, after Sarah left, I poured myself a glass of sweet tea and sat on the back porch. The crickets chirping in the humid air. The mocking note burned in my mind, too old to notice. At 59, I wasn't ancient, but the years had etched lines around my eyes from laughter and loss. My hands, calloused from years of rolling dough, still moved with purpose. I wasn't ready to be dismissed like yesterday's bread. The next few days blurred into a haze of wedding preparations. I threw myself into work, glazing dozens of eclairs for a catering order, the chocolate's glossy sheen a distraction. But suspicion gnawed at me. Thomas's car, keyshawed. He left them on purpose. No, that was paranoia. Still, I started paying attention, the way he'd check his phone during dinner. Stepping outside for quick calls. Sarah chalked it up to work stress. But I wondered, it was at the bridal shower, held at a quaint tea room on Queen Street, that the first real clue surfaced. Amid the laughter and unwrapping of gifts, linen towels, a stand mixer Thomas arrived late, apologizing with a bouquet of lilies. As he hugged Sarah, I noticed a faint smudge on his collar, like lipstick, but not her shade. He brushed it off as ink from a pen. I smiled, but my gut twisted. Later, alone in the bakery's back room, surrounded by sacks of flour and the hum of the industrial mixer, I decided I couldn't ignore it. I needed answers. I started small, not wanting to alarm Sarah or tip my hand. The next morning, after flipping the open sign on the bakery door, I sat at my cluttered desk in the back, the scent of brewing coffee mingling with vanilla extract. With a deep breath, I typed Thomas's name into my laptop's search bar, my fingers hesitating on the keys. Public records, marriage, licenses, divorce, they're all online these days, aren't they? But nothing popped up at first, just business listings for his consulting firm. I sipped my coffee, the steam warming my face, and tried variations. His full name with Savannah, Georgia. That's when I found a court record from Chatham County. A divorce filing that had been initiated but never finalized. Rebecca Harlan versus Thomas Harlan, cited irreconcilable differences. The date was 3 years ago, but no decree. My pulse quickened just a touch, the mouse clicking softly in the quiet room. Was he still married? The certificate in his car suggested yes. I printed the page, the printer, worry, like an accusation, and tucked it into my apron pocket. Over the next week, the suspicion grew like yeast in dough, expanding quietly but insistently. I watched Thomas more closely during our family dinners. He'd come over to my house on East Bay Street, bringing wine and compliments on my shrimp and grits. His laugh was easy, his hand always on Sarah's knee. But now I noticed the glances at his watch, the excuses to step out for air. One evening, as I cleared plates, the clink of china, echoing in the dining room, with its faded wallpaper, left his phone on the table. It buzzed, lighting up with a text, "Miss you already. Kids are asking about Daddy," from Becky. I froze, my hands gripping the dish towel, the fabric twisting under my fingers. Sarah was in the kitchen, humming as she loaded the dishwasher. Thomas returned moments later, pocketing the phone with a casual smile. "Work," he said, but his eyes darted away. That night, lying in bed with the ceiling fan worry overhead, sleep evaded me. The mocking note replayed in my mind. Too old to notice. Well, I was noticing now. I couldn't confront him yet without proof, so I dug deeper. I called in a favor from an old friend, Marlene, who ran a cafe in Savannah. We'd met at a baking convention years ago, bonding over pie crust recipes. Over the phone, her voice crackly but warm, I asked if she knew a Rebecca Harlan. "Oh honey," she said, pausing as if sipping her own coffee. "It's Becky. She's a teacher at the elementary school here. Married to that consultant fellow, Thomas. They've got 2 little ones, twins, I think." "Why do you ask?" The phone felt heavy in my hand, the cord twisting like my insides. I mumbled something about a business connection and hung up, sinking into my armchair. The room spun a little, the lamplight casting long shadows on the hooked rug my mother had made. A second family. Twins. How could he? Sarah deserved better honesty, at least. I thought of her father, how we'd built our life on trust, even through the hard times when the bakery nearly went under. This betrayal wasn't just against her. It felt like a slap to everything I held dear. The discovery came to a head 2 days later. I drove to Savannah myself, the highway stretching out under a gray sky, Spanish moss dangling from oaks like forgotten veils. I parked near the address from the Certificate a Modest ranch house in a quiet suburb. The yard dotted with toys, a tricycle, a swing set creaking in the breeze. I didn't plan to knock. I just needed to see. And there she was, through the window, a woman about Sarah's age. Her hair in a ponytail, laughing as she chased 2 toddlers around the living room. The front door opened, and Thomas stepped out, kissing her goodbye, ruffling the kids' hair. He got into a different car, one I didn't recognize, and drove off. I sat there, engine off, the air thick with the smell of nearby marshland. Tears blurred my vision, hot and unexpected. Not for him, but for Sarah, for the life she'd imagined crumbling like overbaked pastry. I snapped a few photos with my phone, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Evidence, undeniable, on the drive back. The radio played old jazz tunes, but I barely heard them. My mind pieced it together. The business trips, the separate lives. He was playing house in 2 cities, mocking Musa's fools when I got home. The bakery was closed for the day, the display cases empty, save for a few crumbs. I spread out the papers on the counter, the certificate, the court record, the photos. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow. I called Sarah, my voice steadier than I felt. "Come over, darling. We need to talk." She arrived within the hour, her face flushed from a jog along the Battery, her ponytail swinging. "Mom, what's wrong? You sound off." We sat at the small table in the back, the one where I'd taught her to frost cupcakes as a child. I poured us tea, the cups clinking softly, steam rising like unspoken words. Sarah. Honey, I began, my hand reaching for hers across the scarred wood. There's something about Thomas you need to know. Her eyes widened, confusion knitting her brows. I laid out the evidence, piece by piece, the certificate first, then the note, the text, the photos. She stared, her fingers tracing the images, color draining from her face. Mom, this can't be. He said he was divorced. He showed me papers. Her voice cracked, a tremor like the first rumble of thunder. I pulled her into a hug, her head on my shoulder, the scent of her shampoo lavender, like always filling my senses. I know, sweetheart. I wish it weren't true. She pulled back, tears streaking her cheeks. How could he? The wedding's in 2 weeks. Everyone's coming, invitations, the deposits. Anger flashed in her eyes, replacing the shock. I have to confront him. We did it together that night. Thomas arrived at her apartment, unsuspecting, with takeout from a barbecue joint. The smell of smoked ribs clashed with the tension in the air. Sarah met him at the door, her posture rigid. We know Thomas. About Rebecca. About the kids. His face paled, the bag dropping slightly in his grip. What, Sarah? Let me explain. There's no explaining bigamy, I said quietly from the couch, my voice calm but firm. He turned to me, surprise flickering. Ellen. You. How? The notes, words hung unspoken between us. He stammered, excuses tumbling out. It was a mistake. We're separated, but the divorce is stalled. I love Sarai, was going to tell her after the wedding. Sarah laughed bitterly, a sound like breaking glass. After. You mocked my mother in a note. Too old to notice. Well, she noticed. He slumped against the wall, the fight draining from him. I didn't mean. It was a joke to myself. I'm sorry. But apologies couldn't mend this. Sarah handed him back the ring, the diamond catching the light one last time. Get out. And don't come back. The door closed with a soft click, echoing in the silence that followed. We cried together that night, holding each other on her sofa, the city lights twinkling outside like distant stars. The days after that confrontation felt like wading through molasses, thick and slow, each step heavier than the last. Sarah stayed with me in my house, her apartment too full of memories, the framed photos of them at Folly Beach. The half-unpacked wedding gifts stacked in the corner. We'd cancelled the vendors quietly. The florist, the band, the venue at Boone Hall Plantation with its avenue of ancient oaks. But the rehearsal dinner was already paid for. Set for the following Friday at a historic inn on Meeting Street, and the guests' family from out of town, friends who'd flown in were arriving. Sarah wanted to call it all off with a simple email, but I saw the fire in her eyes, dimmed but not extinguished. He shouldn't get away with it. Mom, she whispered one night over chamomile tea, the steam curling up in the dim kitchen light. Everyone thinks he's perfect. Let them see the truth. I nodded, my hand covering hers on the table, feeling the cool metal of her watch, a gift from her father. Then we expose him. At the dinner. With proof. It wasn't revenge. Not really. It was justice, a way to protect others from his lies, to give Sarah closure. We planned it carefully, like rolling out pie dojentole, precise, no cracks. I'd make copies of everything. The marriage certificate, the photos from Savannah, even a printout of the unfinished divorce filing. Sarah would act as if the wedding was still on, responding to texts from aunts and cousins with vague enthusiasm. Thomas, after that night, had bombarded her phone with pleas. Let me explain in person. I can fix this. She ignored most, but replied once. Come to the rehearsal dinner. We'll talk then. Hook set. Those intervening days, I buried myself in the bakery, the routine a balm for my frayed nerves. The bell above the door jingled with regulars. Old Mr. Jenkins, for his daily Danish. The young couple from down the street, sampling wedding cakes, ironically now. I smiled through it, my apron dusted with powdered sugar, but inside, resolve hardened like toffee. I visited the copy shop on Church Street, the machine humming as it duplicated the documents, the clerk chatting about the weather without a clue. At home, I organized them in a manila envelope, labeling it simply truth in my neat script. Sarah practiced her words in front of the mirror, her voice steadying with each rehearsal. Ladies and gentlemen, there's something you need to know. Thomas showed up at my bakery midweek. Unannounced, his tie loosened, eyes pleading. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting golden pools on the tile floor. Ellen, he said, leaning on the counter, the display case between us like a barrier. Please, talk to Sarah. It was a mistake. Becca and I are over. The kids. They're from before. I love your daughter. His voice dropped, a whisper amid the whir of the espresso machine. I wiped my hands on a towel, the fabric rough against my skin, and met his gaze. Love doesn't hide families, Thomas. Or mock mothers. He flinched at that, remembering the note. I didn't mean. I cut him off gently. Save it for Friday. He left without buying anything, the door closing with a soft chime, as the dinner approached. Tension coiled in my chest like a spring. Sarah and I drove to the inn together, the car filled with the scent of her perfume-jasmine, light and hopeful once. She gripped the wheel, her knuckles pale. What if they blame me, Mom, for not seeing it? I touched her arm. They won't, and if they do, they're not worth your tears. The inn was charming, gas lamps flickering along the brick path. The dining room adorned with white linens and low centerpieces of gardenias. Guests milled about. My sister from Atlanta, Thomas's parents looking proud. Friends clinking glasses of sweet tea and wine. Laughter floated on the air, mingled with the aroma of low country. Boiled shrimp, corn, sausage simmering in pots. Thomas arrived last, polished in a suit, flowers in hand. He approached Sarah hesitantly, kissing her cheek as eyes watched. You look beautiful, he murmured. She smiled thinly, playing the part. We took our seats at the long table, silverware gleaming under chandelier light. The first course, cami oysters, on the half-shell, briny and fresh. Conversation buzzed. Wedding toasts rehearsed, stories of how they met. I waited, my envelope tucked in my purse under the table, the paper crinkling faintly when I shifted. Midway through the entree crab cakes, golden and crisp, Thomas stood glass in hand to give a mock toast. To Sarah, the love of my life, and to Ellen, for raising such an incredible woman. Applause rippled. That's when I rose, my chair scraping softly on the hardwood floor. The room quieted, expectant smiles turning my way. Thank you, Thomas, I said, my voice calm, carrying across the table like a gentle breeze. But before we celebrate, there's something everyone should know. I pulled out the envelope, my hands steady, and laid the documents on the table. Thomas is already married. To Rebecca Harlan, in Savannah. They have two Here's the certificate, the photos, the records. Gasps echoed, forks clattering against plates. Thomas's face drained of color, his glass trembling. Ellen, what are you? This is a misunderstanding. But the proof was there, passed hand to hand, his parents' eyes widening, friends whispering. Sarah stood beside me, her chin high. It's true. The wedding's off. Chaos ensued, quietly his mother tearing up. My sister hugging Sarah, questions flying like startled birds. Thomas tried to explain, his voice rising. We're separated. It's complicated. But the note, when I read it aloud, the old bats too old to notice, sealed it. Laughter turned to murmurs of disgust. We left soon after. The night air cool on our flushed faces, the stars bright over the steepled skyline. In the car, Sarah exhaled, a long release. It's done. I nodded, the weightlifting just a fraction. Justice, not cruelty, but it stung all the same. In the weeks that followed the rehearsal dinner, Charleston seemed to wrap itself around us like a warm quilt, its rhythms soothing the raw edges of our hurt. The city moved on, tourists strolling the market with baskets of pralines, horse-drawn carriages clip-clopping over cobblestones, but, for Sarah and me, time stretched and bent. She took a leave from work, spending mornings in my bakery, her hands dusted with flour as she shaped loaves. A quiet therapy we'd shared since she was small. The scent of rising bread filled the air, a reminder that some things could be mended with patience and heat. Thomas vanished from our lives, like mist burning off the harbor at dawn. His parents called once, their voices heavy with apology over the phone line, explaining they'd known about the separation, but not the deception. We thought he'd sorted it, his mother said, her words trembling. Sarah listened politely, then hung up, her fingers lingering on the receiver. We didn't hear from him, Agino. Please, no excuses. Rumors trickled in from mutual friends. He'd moved back to Savannah full-time, facing a messy divorce now that the truth was out. Justice, in its own quiet way, without our hands forcing it further. Sarah grieved in layers, like peeling an onion, tears at first, sharp and stinging, then a dull ache that softened over time. We'd sit on the porch swing in the evenings, the chains creaking softly, sipping iced mint tea as the sun dipped behind the palmettos. I feel so stupid, Mom, she'd say, her voice low, staring at the fireflies flickering in the yard. I'd rock us gently, my arm around her shoulders. Not stupid, honey. Trusting. And that's a strength, not a flaw. We'd talk about her father, how he'd always said love was a garden needing weeding, but worth the work. Slowly, she started smiling again, small at first, like the first bloom after a storm. For me, healing came through my hands, as it always had. The bakery became my anchor once more, but I felt a pull to share it wider. One afternoon, wiping down the counters after the lunch-rushed clang of the register still echoing, I spotted a flyer at the community center. Next door, volunteers needed for teen baking classes. It stirred something in me. At 59, with lines etched from years of early rises and late closings, I wasn't too old to teach, to pass on what I'd learned. I signed up that day, my pen scratching across the form, with purpose. The classes started in the community center's kitchen, a sunny space with mismatched ovens and laughter echoing off the tile walls. The teens were a mix, some shy, hiding behind hoodies, others bold, cracking jokes as they measured sugar. I taught them basics. How to cream butter until fluffy, the gentle fold for meringues, the patience for proofing dough. Baking's like life, I'd say, my voice calm over the whir of mixers. Rush it, and it falls flat. Give it time, and it rises. One girl, Mia, reminded me of Sarah at that age, curly hair tied back, eyes bright with curiosity. She confided in me one session, flower on her cheek, about her own family troubles. A dad who left, a mom working doubles. I listened, nodded, shared a bit of my story without the details. We rebuild, one recipe at a time, I told her. By the end of the course, they'd baked a charity sale, spread cookies, pies, breads, and the pride in their faces mirrored my own mending heart. Through it all, I met Jacob, the owner of the cafe down the block. He'd stop by for coffee and scones, his easy smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. 62, widowed like me, with a gentle way about him, hands calloused from years of roasting beans, stories of sailing the intracoastal waterway. Our talks started simple: weather, the best spots for shrimp. Then deeper, over shared lunches at his place, the aroma of fresh ground coffee mingling with my baked goods. "You've got a gift, Ellen," he said one day, leaning on the counter, steam rising from our mugs. "Not just with dough, but with people." I felt a warmth I hadn't in years. Not romance, exactly not yet, but companionship. Like finding a missing ingredient, Sarah noticed, teasing me gently as she helped close the shop one evening, the sunset painting the windows orange. "Mom, you light up when he comes in." I blushed, stacking trays with a soft clatter. "He's just a friend." But she hugged me, her chin on my shoulder. "You deserve more than just friends. Dad would want that." Her words lingered, a permission I hadn't known I needed. We walked home together, arms linked, the streetlights buzzing on as dusk fell. As months passed, the wound scarred over, strong and flexible. Sarah threw herself back into work, even dating Casualia nice guy from her office, no rush. The bakery thrived. The classes became a regular thing, drawing more kids each session. Jacob and I shared dinners now, walks along the Ravenel Bridge, watching ships glide under its cables. Life wasn't perfectilities, still carried a quiet echo of what might have been, but it was ours, rebuilt with intention. Looking back, I see the lesson clear as a Charleston sunrise. Secrets fester in the dark, but truth, even painful, sets the table for healing. I wasn't too old to notice, or to start anew. And in that, there's grace.